An elderly veteran is humiliated in the middle of the street without knowing who he really is. One phone call sets off a chain of events that turns the entire city upside down. Men from the past return without weapons, but with something that truly inspires respect. And when everyone is already expecting a conflict, the heroes give an answer that no one will forget. Don't forget to subscribe and like, so you don't miss new stories. The March sun rose lazily over the horizon, casting a soft amber light over the streets of Bloomsville. The town was waking up slowly, as if it wasn't sure if it should. The wind ruffled the rusty sign of the old diner on the corner, blew dust across the asphalt, and fluttered the flag by the post office, barely hanging on to its faded pole, but still standing. Ray Harper walked slowly out of his house, opening the creaky wooden door. Its hinges made a sound familiar only to him, because it contained everything: the years, the battles, the loneliness. He paused on the steps, peering out at the street, and winced slightly in the sun. His face was covered with a network of deep wrinkles, but his gaze was firm and clear. He took a thin cane from his jacket pocket, not out of weakness, but more out of habit, and leaning on it, walked down the road to the gas station. The walk was not long. Everything was close by here: a store, a post office, a school that had long since been boarded up. Ray walked as if he were counting his steps, each one with equal precision, as if according to military regulations. Passers-by, meeting him, looked away. Not because they did not recognize him. On the contrary, they knew who he was. They just did not want to remember that they had once called him a hero. On the corner of the establishment, Joe's Gas and Deli, stood three guys. Young, loud, in leather jackets with stripes. On their backs, a red raven and a skull, as if hastily painted. Bikers. You could hear them a block away. Loud laughter, music from the phone, empty cans that they threw into the trash can. Missing. Ray stepped inside the gas station. The room smelled of hot coffee, a damp floor, and something oily. He walked up to the machine, poured himself a black one, no sugar, no milk, and went to the cashier. "Morning, Mr. Harper." The young cashier nodded. "Good morning." He handed over a dollar bill, waited for the change, and was about to turn around when he heard footsteps behind him. "Look who came to see us." One of the bikers walked inside, tall, with a thick beard and a smug grin. "Hey, Grandpa, can you still walk, or are you on autopilot?" Ray didn't answer. He just turned and headed for the exit. "Oh, wait a minute," said the other one, a brown-haired man with a snake tattoo on his neck. "Sure ye. Are you by any chance that Rambo they told you about in school? War, medals, hero, and all that?" He laughed. The laughter was empty, loud. Not because it was funny, but because they wanted to seem like the boss. "Damn, that's our local monument." "Hey, hold your coffee, veteran." He slammed the glass down hard. It flew out of Ray's hands, turned over, and spilled on the floor, leaving a brown stain. There was silence. Even the cashier froze. Ray bent down, picked up the glass, put it back. He looked at them, calmly, with some kind of quiet fatigue, and without saying a word, left. The bikers shouted something else after him, but he did not turn around. The wind had already cooled the coffee, but there was no anger on his face, only silence. He walked home slowly, as if he was walking not along the street, but through his own memory. Near the house he stopped, looked up at the flag. It was weakly fluttering in the morning air. Inside he took off his jacket, hung it on a hook, and went into the living room. Everything was there just as it had been 20 years ago. An armchair by the window, a fireplace, an old lamp, a framed photograph. The photo showed young faces in uniform, him and his guys, those who hadn't returned from every mission. Ray went to the sideboard, opened the bottom door. He took out a wooden box, neatly upholstered in leather. Inside was an old mobile phone. Not a touchscreen, no internet, just numbers. Just one written line: Lewis McCall. He sat down, looked at the screen, pressed the call button. Beeps. 1, 2, 3. "Hello." His voice was hoarse, a little muffled, but alive. "Lewis, this is Ray." "Shit, are you okay?" "Yeah, for now." But then something came up. "Who? Where?" "Gas. Joe's." Pause, very short. How many of us do you need? All of us. We'll be there in an hour. The connection was lost. Ray put the phone down. He stood up. He went to the window. A school bus drove past the glass and the children, yawning, looked into space. And he looked at them, at the street, at the city that had forgotten everything. And he whispered, "Now let him remember." The North Highway stretched like an old scar on the country. Dust rose behind a black SUV, cruising smoothly as if nothing else mattered. Lewis McCall was driving, graying, hard-faced, wearing sunglasses and quiet. On the passenger seat lay a worn backpack, and on top of it a metal dog tag with a dent in the edge. Two other cars were reflected in the rearview mirror. Reuben Scott in one, Sam Hardy in the other, two silent faces that suggested mountains, sand, smoke. They weren't talking on the radio. There was no need. They were content to drive. Around the bend where the old water tower was crumbling into rust, a sign appeared. Bloomsville, 3 miles. Lewis stepped on the gas, and the car sped up a bit. There had been no reason to get up in the city for an alarm in a long time. But when this number rang, it was impossible not to answer. At the same time, Ray Harper was sitting on the veranda with a mug of freshly brewed coffee. His fingers were shaking slightly, but his gaze was calm. He heard somewhere in the distance a dog barked. A neighbor's gate creaked. A cyclist rode by. Everything was as usual. Only the sky was clearer. Not because it became clearer, because he looked differently. "Did you really call them?" came a voice from behind the door. He turned around. A young man of about 20 stood in the doorway, wearing an old t-shirt and with his hands stained with machine oil. It was Eddie, the neighbor's son, whom Ray had once taught to change spark plugs in a car and to keep quiet when it was better to listen. "I called," Ray said calmly. "Are they really coming?" "They're already on their way." The boy fell silent. He wanted to ask why, but something in the old man's face told him that this was not up for discussion. "Do you want some coffee?" Ray asked. "No, and thank you." "So go. And remember, a man's word is tested not by how he speaks, but by who comes to him when he is silent." 10 minutes later, 3 cars sped down the main street of the town. The first stopped at an old service station. Lewis got out, a big guy in a faded leather jacket and jeans. He took off his glasses and looked around. He walked up to Ray and extended his hand. "You're still the same, Harper. And you still don't shave before the road." Actually occurred mean, why shave if you're going into battle? They smiled. The others followed. Reuben shook hands silently, clapped them on the shoulder. Sam held up 2 fingers, their old sign. The 2 silent ones just nodded. No one asked what had happened. Everyone already knew. "Are we going to the bar?" Lewis asked, watching the sunset begin to turn the sky bronze. "Let's go. The copper mule is still standing. Josh's son is behind the counter now. Will he remember you?" "He remembers us all." They headed down the street. People turned around. Some recognized them. Some simply felt that something different had come to the city. Not noisy, not bright. Real. The bar greeted them with creaking doors and the smell of wood. The interior was almost unchanged. Heavy oak tables, chairs with worn upholstery, a bar counter, behind which stood Josh Taylor, bearded, in a black shirt with rolled-up sleeves. He looked up and froze for a moment. "Oh my God," he breathed out. "It's you." "We," Ray nodded. Josh came out from behind the counter and shook hands, his eyes full of memories. "I thought you wouldn't show up. The bar is mine now. Father left 7 years ago." "He was with us," Lewis said quietly. "I know. He always said if one day the door opens and you walk in, it means the world needs to be reminded again who you are." Ray looked around the room. Everything was there. Even the old team photo, faded but not forgotten, hung in a frame above the mirror. He walked up to it, ran his finger along the glass. "This is where it all started." "It will end here," Lewis replied. "But not like then." "What do you suggest?" "Not a fight, not a threat, a lesson. For the city, for those who didn't understand." "Lesson?" "We will show that strength is not fists, it is actions. We will go out where everyone will see them. We will not beat, we will build." "And what about them? They will watch and understand." Reuben poured himself some whiskey. He took a sip. "I don't fight anymore, but I still know how to be useful." Sam chuckled. So, we work tomorrow? Tomorrow, Ray nodded. In the morning. They sat at the table as they once did, shoulder to shoulder, without uniform, without commanders, but with the same thing that bound them together forever. The silence between them was not emptiness. It was what was left after the shots. Night fell silently on Bloomsville, but the town already knew that the morning would be different. The morning in Bloomsville began with a thin layer of fog that lay over the streets, as if the city had put on a soft blanket, trying to delay awakening. The air was damp and crisp, heavy with the smell of earth and raindrops stuck on the rooftops. Birds cried lazily, at intervals, as if testing whether it was too early. But for Ray Harper it was too late. He had woken an hour before dawn, as he always had, since the days when a soldier did not wait for light to act. In the kitchen the kettle was boiling, the toaster was clicking, and neatly cut strips of bacon lay on the table. Everything was happening quietly, measuredly, as if the house was inhabited not by a person, but by habit itself. An old army jacket hung over the back of a chair, thick, worn, but with such an appearance as if it were waiting for an order. Ray sat down at the table, sipped his tea slowly and looked out the window. The street outside was almost empty. Only a lonely postman sorting through letters in his hand, and old man Jennings walking his lame dog. It's time, Ray said quietly. At this time, in the backyard of the Copper Mule, the men were already gathering. Lewis McCall laid out on a wooden table a drawing of the old playground that had once been built at the school. There was a swing here, he said, pointing, and here's a sandbox. Half of it was torn down, but the frame remains. I've got some boards in my car, Sam said, adjusting his bandana, and I got out some paint. 4 cans, blue and yellow. And the tools? Asked Reuben. I have everything in the trunk. A drill, hammers, screwdrivers. They spoke simply, as if they were going to fix an old fence at their dacha. But in every movement, in every phrase, there was a purpose. No one asked the question why, because they knew this would be the answer. An answer without fists. Listen, Josh said, walking toward them with 2 thermoses. If you really do this, people are going to talk. The bikers are going to know. Let them know, Lewis said. The main thing is that they see. They loaded the tools into the truck, secured the boards, and climbed into the vehicles. Ray was last. He held a small box in his hand, containing a folded flag, the same one that stood at his house. The folds were crisp, like a memory. The playground was located behind the school, in a park that in recent years had become a strip of weeds and broken glass. The swings had long since rusted, the benches were cracked, the carousel was overgrown with moss. But when the veterans got out of their cars, the place became quiet again. Even the birds fell silent for a second. We don't repair, Ray said. We restore. They started by clearing. Branches, trash, nails. Someone was dragging sacks. Someone was sawing off old boards. They worked silently, only the sound of hammers, the creaking of wood, the rustling of paper with drawings could be heard. Half an hour passed before the first passers-by appeared. A young woman with a stroller stopped by the path. Who is this? She asked her neighbor, taking out her earphone. Veterans, those very same ones. They came themselves. Then a schoolboy on a bicycle stopped. Then an old man with a dog. Then teenagers. Some started filming on their phones, some just watched. And in the eyes of many, there was that very emotion that you rarely see in a city where everyone knows each other. Surprise. By lunchtime, the playground was coming to life. New beams were laid for the swings. The carousel was being painted. One of the veterans, Tom, was burning the words, "We are here," into a wooden bench. Eddie, a neighbor's boy, came up uninvited and picked up a hammer. What are you standing there for? Lewis said to him. Take the saw, that red one, and put on your gloves. You're working with us now. Seriously, what did you think? He smiled and ran for the tools. At that moment, they rode past. The bikers, a group of 6 motorcycles. The engines rumbled loudly, confidently. They slowed, saw who was working, and froze. One of them, Travis, took off his helmet. His face was tense. Are these the ones? The very same ones, answered the companion. What are they doing? They are building for the city. It's crazy. Travis stared for a long moment. Then he turned to the others. Let's go, before it's too late. The engines roared, the bikes turned the corner, but there was no longer mockery in their movement. There was confusion, perhaps the beginning of understanding. The sun was setting. Ray set up the flagpole. The cleaned, ironed flag was hoisted onto it. When the cloth straightened out in the wind, the people around applauded, without being asked, simply because they couldn't help it. "Did you know this would happen?" Josh asked Ray. "No," he replied, "but I knew it was right." "And now," Ray looked at the flag, "now let them watch. We're not going anywhere." We just reminded them. The morning was windless, and that in itself seemed like a sign. The air hung still, as if waiting to see which way the city would swing. Thin clouds floated across the sky as if they had been brushed, and the light filtered through them in soft beams, painting Bloomsville warm gold and faded milk. There was a silence over Joe's, where it had all begun. Not the kind that comes at night, but the kind that comes before something important. Ray Harper walked up to the porch wearing the work jacket he'd once worn while scouring the forests of Vietnam and leaned on the railing. His face was focused, calm, his eyes the same expression he'd once had when he'd looked up at the distant hillside and the roar of helicopter rotors. Lewis came up behind him and handed him a thermos. "Are you ready?" "I was ready from the day I came back. I just didn't know why." "You'll find out today." "Will they come?" "Already in the city. I saw one of them hanging around the school. Apparently they're checking where we are." "Good. Then they will be there." By 11 o'clock in the morning, people began to gather on the very same site that the veterans had restored the day before. Without invitations, they just showed up, with children, with cups of coffee, with distrust and curiosity. Some were filming on their phones. Others were bringing bags of water and sandwiches. The benches were shining with fresh varnish. The sandbox was covered with new sand. The flag over the entrance to the park was fluttering freely. "Don't you think this will be perceived as a provocation?" Josh asked quietly, approaching Ray. The provocation was that we were silent for so many years, and this is a reminder, just a reminder. "And that's it?" "That's enough." At exactly 11:05, a column of motorcycles pulled out onto the road to the park. 6 motorcycles, black jackets, stripes. The bikers rode slowly, did not honk, did not roar their engines. They were visible from afar, and the children on the playground fell silent. Even the swing stopped. All eyes were on them. Travis Moore, the one who knocked over the coffee cup, stopped first. He took off his helmet, jumped off his bike, and walked slowly to the fence. There was still bravado in his walk, but there was no longer mockery in his eyes. "Good morning," he said quietly. Ray nodded. "And you too." "I wanted to talk." "Haha, I'm listening." "We've seen what you do, and, well, it's impressive. Honestly, we are not here for the experience. I know, we just didn't expect it. We thought you were like everyone else, old men with grudges, and we are those who remained and did not forget." Travis rubbed his neck and looked away. "It was stupid. Back then, at the gas station, I was rude. I didn't know who you were, who you are. You weren't supposed to know, but you were supposed to respect. I understand. Now I understand." Silence hung between them. The other bikers dismounted and stood at a distance, not interfering. One of them, a very young man with red hair, looked at the flag with an expression as if he was seeing it for the first time. "We want to help," Travis said quietly. "In any way we can. Really. Tomorrow at 9 in the morning we will repair the fence near the old church. You and yours will have enough work. We will come. Then come not in leather. Come as a human being." Travis nodded silently. He turned and walked back. But he didn't get on the bike. He stood there watching the kids play on the swings he'd once considered junk. The veterans didn't applaud. They didn't raise their hands. They just kept working. One painted a park sign. Another dug in a new trash can. A third handed out water. "Do you think they'll really come?" Sam asked Lewis. "I think so, but not for us, for who they want to become." So it wasn't all in vain? No action goes into emptiness. It just takes longer to return. The sun rose higher, the light playing on a varnished board with an engraved inscription. "We are here because we once left. We returned because no one called." Ray stood by the tree, looking into the faces of the people passing by. They no longer looked away. They nodded. They said, "Thank you." Not loudly but sincerely. Teenagers came up. They asked questions. They listened. One boy handed him a paper cup of coffee. "Here you go. I poured it myself. Be careful, it's hot." "Thank you." He took it. He took a sip. And for the first time in a long time, the coffee felt warm not only to his taste, but also to his heart, because everything that had been done had finally found an answer. And that answer was not in words, but in looks, in silence, in the fact that no one called him just an old man anymore. Autumn came to Bloomsville almost imperceptibly, in the soft, cool wind, in the yellow at the edges of the maple trees, in the light rustle of leaves underfoot. The streets became quieter, people slower, and even the noise of cars sounded as if muffled by time. The city lived its own life, but something in it had changed. A small, almost elusive change, as if someone had straightened something out of place, returned something to its place. The square in front of the old school was filled with people. No one had called them specially. They were just walking. Families, children, the elderly, students, a couple of teachers with flowers. Chairs were set up near the temporary stage. Instrumental music was softly pouring from the speakers. The air was filled with the smell of autumn pie. Someone had brought a whole tray of treats covered with a checkered napkin. The atmosphere was not solemn, but respectful, as if everyone had come not to celebrate, but to give thanks. Ray Harper stood a little further away. He was wearing a dark suit, with a medal neatly gleaming on his lapel, not for show, but for remembrance. Next to him were Louis, Sam, Reuben, and the others. The same ones. None of them were holding speeches or rehearsing gestures. They were simply standing, as they had stood all their lives, shoulder to shoulder. The mayor of the city came out on stage, a woman of about 50, with kind eyes and a heavy sense of responsibility in her voice. She picked up the microphone, looked around at those gathered, and, slightly bowing her head, said, "Today we are unveiling a monument. But this is not just a sculpture. This is a sign. This is a trace. We are not erecting it for the sake of a report, not for the sake of a photograph in a newspaper. We are erecting it so that we will never look past again, so that we will not remain silent when we need to speak, so that we will remember those who live among us and carry within themselves the power of a silent feet." Next to the stage stood a pedestal covered with dark cloth. Two boys from the senior classes came up and carefully removed the cloth. A monument appeared before everyone, a bronze figure of an elderly man with a cane in his hand. He stood straight, calmly, with a slight bow of his head, not in a fighting pose, not with a heroic expression, simply with dignity. On the slab was carved, "To those who remained, to those who looked into the silence and made it audible." The crowd froze. Some quietly applauded. No enthusiasm, no show, just from the heart. Ray hung his head, sighed. He didn't like attention. But this wasn't about him. This was about everyone who had ever felt invisible. "Is that you?" the boy asked, coming up to him with wide-open eyes. "In terms of, well, on the monument, is that you?" Ray looked at the bronze figure and smiled. No, boy, it's you. It's all of us." Travis approached him. He was wearing a simple shirt and jeans. His face was tired, but not from life, but from thinking. He walked hesitantly, like a man entering a stranger's home for the first time. "Mr. Harper," he said, "just Ray. Ray, I wanted to thank you for everything, for not responding with evil, for showing me how it could be different. We work at the church now. We help with repairs. One of us now drives around delivering groceries to the elderly. Not for atonement, just because I wanted to be a better person. That's enough, and remember, being strong is not being loud. It's being needed. I won't forget." Travis extended his hand. Ray shook it. People around him noticed. And there was more in that gesture than in all the speeches. Because sometimes change happens without announcement. It happens when a person stops being afraid to look their yesterday in the eye. The square slowly emptied. People left silently. Each brought something of their own. Someone a memory, someone a promise. The veterans stood near the monument for a long time. "That's it," Louis said. "We've done what we had to do." "And now?" Sam asked. Ray smiled and looked up at the clear autumn sky. "Now you can just live." And they went. No parade, no orchestra. Just down the leaf-strewn street, disappearing into a city that had finally learned what it meant to remember.